When it comes to training our back, there are very few bad exercises out there, and really every single back exercise you're gonna find is gonna stimulate your back in some way or other. But if you really want to grow your back, if you really want to layer muscle onto your lats, your rhomboids, your rear delt, then we want to be targeted and smart with the exercises that we're doing. And we want to choose exercises that are going to take us through a full range of motion. They're going to let us fully contract and get a lot of stretch on our back, and they're going to let us load. Plenty of back exercises that you see on social media, on TikTok and Instagram just aren't going to do that, and they just aren't optimal for building your back. So let's eliminate a couple of those exercises and give you some better moves. That way you can get the ultimate back pump. When we think about the deadlift, it is a great overall exercise that should be in all routines. It's something you should just know how to do, and it is a great functional pattern. But here is what it is not. It is not a great builder of your lats. Yes, your lats are going to be stimulated somewhat when you do a deadlift because to some level you're shifting into shoulder extension. Even if we don't have to necessarily work for that position, there's a lot of tension on our lats. But that is not a core part or a core reason for doing the deadlift, and it shouldn't be. So don't let people tell you that when you are doing deadlifts, you are training your lats. If you really want to train your lats through that strict shoulder extension pattern, then what we want to turn to is something called the straight arm pull down. Now this is a great endgame back exercise that's going to attack your lats almost in the identical way that a deadlift theoretically does, except we're going to be able to get a lot more stretch at the top of every single rep, and we're going to get a deep contraction on the back end of every single rep. So this is a much better way to really attack your lats through shoulder extension and strictly, and you're going to get a lot more out of it. The deadlift is great and should be in your routine. It is just not a builder of your lats. An exercise I see a ton that looks fun but really just isn't giving you maximum gains for your back is something called the Renegade Row. Here are the issues with the Renegade Row. It's not going to give us a full contraction at any point of any of our back muscles, and it's not going to really let us get a maximum stretch either. And on top of that, you're hugely limited in the amount of load you can use, and you're not going to get much time under tension. If anything, the Renegade Row is a good exercise for our abs in terms of anti-rotation, and it's going to give us some grip work, it's going to give us some biceps work, but in terms of a back builder, it is just not worth your time. Now, if we want to kind of go through the same pattern and work a row that's going to be very strict and have a little bit of anti-rotation benefit, let's go to an elevated plank row instead. With this simple tweak, what we wind up doing is we get to keep constant tension on our lats and mid-back. We're still getting the abdominal and anti-rotation benefit, and on top of that, because we're in a slightly higher position, we're going to get a lot more stretch on our lats and rhomboids, and we can still get that awesome deep contraction at the top. So switch to the elevated plank row if you actually want to grow your back. The Renegade Row is fun, just not worth your time. The basic dumbbell row over the last couple years has seen a tweak on Instagram, and that tweak just isn't worth your time. That's what we call the straight arm dumbbell row. In this dumbbell row, instead of simply rowing a dumbbell up, we're theoretically creating a longer lever by trying to lock our elbow into position, and in theory, this is going to challenge our lats that much more. Except here's the problem when we do that. One, we wind up limited by our triceps, and we wind up also swinging the weight backwards because it's really, really hard to maintain that closer to locked position. So yes, we do get that longer lever for our lats, but we're just not placing our body in an optimal position where it can focus on a really, really clean contraction and where we can really optimize our row and get a really, really good eccentric at the back of that end of that row too. So instead of chasing that straight arm dumbbell row and working through that, what I would suggest you do is just go to a classic dumbbell row, let your elbow bend, because what's going to happen then is we can go heavier. So even though we're working with a slightly shorter lever, that extra load that we can place on the dumbbell is going to create plenty of challenge for our lats. It's going to be a much more natural movement, and the best part that I like about it, you're going to be able to get a nice controlled eccentric and a really good stretch. That's really going to help you grow your lats a lot more than over focusing on trying to keep your elbow as straight as possible when you're doing the dumbbell row. An exercise that we see way too commonly from people who really just don't understand the purpose of the pull down is the behind the neck pull down. Now, the issue with the behind the neck pull down in terms of training your lats is that, one, we're putting our shoulder in a very compromised position. We can very easily wind up in internal rotation. That's just not going to feel natural. It's not going to feel great, and it could lead to shoulder issues down the line. The other issue is because of the pulling angle, depending on your anatomy, you may not even be able to truly get a deep contraction through your lats when you're doing this pull down, because it's really just not how our body is meant to work. Instead of doing behind the neck pull downs, we're just gonna switch to a standard pull down in front of the neck. You're gonna get a much deeper lat contraction out of this by pulling that bar to your chest, and you're gonna be able to focus on pulling your elbows to your hip pockets. Instead of going behind the neck, when you go in front of the neck, you're gonna be able to really get that deep contraction, and that's what we wanna chase when we're going for back growth. So if you stick with these 4 moves, get rid of the other stuff, you will get a much better back pump from your workouts, you'll stay free of injury, and you won't be wasting your time, so you're gonna make much faster gains.